Can you learn to mix techno in a single day? Difficult question to answer, but last week I had to do my best to try and answer it. You may have seen in last week's video that we ran a techno intensive where we're teaching people in real life for 1 week as much as we can about techno. Whoa, this is lights from my disco ball. Crazy. And in that week, we had just a single day to condense as much knowledge about mixing techno as we basically could do. So what did I do? Well, I invited Brice from Incident Studio, who's a mixing and mastering engineer who specializes in techno, all sorts of techno, but specifically also kind of deep, groovy, hypnotic, atmospheric techno. So someone who has a really grounded connection with contemporary techno. So I challenged him to come here to the Underdog Classroom in Brussels and teach the students as much as he could teach them in a day, in theory and in practice by working on their work.
Well, welcome everyone. Maybe I'm going to do a quick tour of myself. So I started also with DJing like 25 years ago. I graduated as sound engineer at SE Institute in 2009, and I also studied contemporary music composition at the Royal Conservatory in Mons. I worked for 3 years at Fuse as a sound engineer, and then I went working there as a booker. Unfortunately, COVID happened and I stopped working there, and I wanted to pursue my own musical career. And right now I'm mostly working as a mastering engineer and running my own mastering studio called Incident Studio, to wrap it up short. So the idea of today is we're going to talk about a topic I hate to love, or I love to hate, which is mixing.
And I want to share that experience with you now. The whole one-day mixing course by Brice can be found on the Underdog Courses website. And the rest of this video is a taster of that course, so you can get a sense of how Brice teaches, because he's one charismatic individual that I find transmits knowledge very well. I had to take down the disco balls because they were just throwing random shades on my face. Of course, mixing music is something that you could study multiple years for, right? And so this is about as efficient as one day could ever be. What I would recommend is that you do yourself a favor, take a day out and just play this from start to finish and absorb as much as you can, because this is going to be one of the best value for money learning experiences when it comes to mixing techno music. I'm going to get out of your way now and let you enjoy Brice.
Another thing about mixing, as I said, I told already about the recursivity of things, but the main element is level. No matter what, if you have no sound, well, you don't hear anything. It might sound silly to phrase it like that, but so the level of your fader will be the strongest tool, whatever, in your toolbox to craft the mix. And this is why in traditional mixing rules approach, it's the first step. It's what we call balancing. This is why I think you spoke about balancing, where it was more about frequency balancing, but the first thing is actually level balance. And when you think about that, level balance is the first move that will sketch your track. We'll talk about starting with a sketch and then diving into it, but what element is louder, what element is quieter, it's also defining what is a main element and what is a subsidiary element. It's defining what is more closer to you and what is more further away, because the further you walk from something, the quieter it gets. So level is the strongest tool to create contrast, presence, and hierarchy in a mix, right?
That's why I'm thinking, if you hear techno, then you have the lights, but they're always on the background, they're not so in front.
Yeah, and the kick will always be kind of up front. Maybe not like fucking in your face, but there. If you listen to pop and vocal music, the vocal will always be up front, because you need to understand, to hear all the words, and this is the main element. You want it there. Funny story, there is a slight difference in aesthetics between French pop music and English pop music. In English pop music, vocals are a bit more considered like an instrument and are a bit more blend into the song, and in French the vocal is much more upfront. It's an aesthetic choice, right? Some people started to do analysis about frequency content and dynamics of the language that could, whatever. There is that level, okay? And so level is the first move you're gonna do to give a sense of where you're gonna go with your mix. And talking about this recursivity, it's funny because you'll notice as first when you start doing that, +2, +3, +4, -2 on that channel. I don't know. Feels right. Feels right. Man, yeah, why not? The further you're gonna go into the mix, the more the positions are gonna be fixed. Because everything starts to be in the right position, and all of a sudden it makes sense to be there and not louder. And so some people consider as a rule that if they move the fader by more than 1 decibel and that it feels wrong, that this starts to be the position where the mix is okay. As I said, I don't like rules, but it's just as an indicator of saying, okay, at the beginning, I'm cooking. I'm adding my ingredients. It's not there yet, but after 3 hours of being on the stove, and now I can say, okay, this needs more salt. It's obvious. So you're gonna build through that. Any questions so far to that?
Is that like the example of cooking? You cannot throw everything in at once. So if you level down your mix, is that when you do it like you can do your kick and then you can do your lead? Because if I make a track, you see, it depends on how my creative flow is, the structure is.
There are different approaches.
Is there a way to do?
There are different approaches. There are different ways. As always, I think there is not one single proper way to do it. It's interesting to try things out to find what works for you. Later on, we're going to talk about my favorite approach, which is what I call the backbone approach, is stripping down the track to what is making the track. What are all the channels I can mute and I still feel this is my track? Usually in techno, you'll have the kick, you'll have the bass, and a lead element, or it can be a peculiar percussive element because it's that sound that is really like the lead somehow. It's not a melody, but it's the lead. It can be a drone because that drone, I mean, this is the backbone. Sometimes a hi-hat really needs to be there. It's not because it's a tiny hi-hat, it's the backbone. Usually things like a shaker, reverbs, ambiances are not that, but in ambient music, the reverb is part of it. So this is why I said it's not like one element is part of the backbone or not. It's your choice, your taste to what is making your music. And usually I start with that and mixing those together so I feel that this is the core of the track. And then the rest, I can find space to blend it in. Other people have another approach, which is starting with the low end element, because low end is usually what takes up the most energy. And so they say, I'm starting to level things out in the low end and I build up until the high end because it's easier to make space for things in the high end because it takes less energy. Yeah. Other people start... Yeah.
So the idea is like you cut down everything and then you bring everything slowly.
Yeah, and they start with the sub bass, the kick, and then they build up until the elements are...
The backbone.
Yeah, yeah. I like the backbone approach for that reason of making sense, and also what is, in my opinion, nice with this idea is that if you're mixing pop music, you will start with the vocal. If you're mixing drum and bass, you'll start with the bass. It's not like an absolute rule, it's really depending on the style as well. The other technique is, as I said, from low to high, and usually there are even people who rearrange the order of the tracks in that way, to be able to easily navigate in their section, in their template, in the project, and from low to high or from low to high, whatever. But there is a kind of ascending order of the channels depending on the frequencies. It's another way. Some other people, which has been quite of a, I would say, pop rock approach, is to start with the drums, because this is the main foundation of what gives the grooves, what gives the punch. And usually what happens is like drums, a bass line to have the harmonic and the depth, because the bass is both a harmonic foundation, it's what's giving place for all the harmonies in the track, but it's also a low-end foundation, so the bass carries the track. It's difficult to have a track without a bass line, right? Sometimes it's only a kick that has a huge decay that works as that, but you want that bottom end to carry the track, right? So bass, drums, bass line, and then vocal. And this is kind of the trio in many pop records, because usually also in terms of frequency and in space, vocal sits there, kick, snare, hi-hats on top, and the bass is there. So there's usually quite some space plays the vocal even if the drum is already mixed. Usually the only element is the snare drum. I'm putting it a bit further, a bit quieter. This is the only one that might be a bit fighting with the vocal, but whatever. So I have a friend who just starts with the sounds that he feels like touches him more. It's like, okay, no, this is, I really like that sound. It's kind of backbone, but even in a more restricted way. It's like, I like that sound and I want to give that sound the most of space possible. I'm kind of doing a mastering of just that sound. Funny fact, in pop music, they start doing vocal mastering before the track mastering. Things like Rihanna, the whole vocal has been pre-mixed and mastered, level match and everything before getting back into the session. And this is how they achieve those amazingly clean, controlled vocals, whatever. So you see, there is no one single way. It's finding what works for you and what makes sense for your music. Of course, if there's no vocal in your music, well, what do you do with that mid-range part, right?
I have a question.
Yeah.
This week I often hear like our brain is tricking us with things that get louder. Is that not difficult then if you do sit down and do a mix down that your brain is constantly tricked? Because something you receive it louder than you think, oh, it's pleasant to hear?
That's a very interesting question and important note. The trickery of loudness and the trickery of your eyes. Those are two things. We could play maybe something at the break. There is something called the McGurk effect. I don't know if maybe you heard about it. It's very funny. If you hear someone saying something, watching the screen, it's repeating one word. And then out of a sudden, and there's a text just below him, just as a at the end to say like, okay, this is what we all heard that word, right? The sound doesn't change, but then the shape of the mouth of the people talking changes. And out of a sudden, you hear something else.
Have a look at this. What do you hear?
So far, what did you hear? Ba, right?
But look what happens when we change the picture.
Fa, fa, fa. While the sound, if you close your eyes, the sound didn't change. This is how our brain tricks us. One of the many known issues with mixing engineers on big consoles is it happened to everyone. Trust me. Yeah, oh, I need to put the guitar a bit louder. Yeah, that's good. Oh shit, I was on the snare. Because with many faders, sometimes you just miss it. But while touching it, you are convinced it was the right one. And it was a good move. And you heard it. That's what we call confirmation bias.
It's an hallucination.
Yeah. It's because how our brain is wired, eyes are kind of taking 80% of the attention. Because it's the sense that gives you the confirmation. Right? You hear things, you turn your head to watch it. Right? Eye is the sense that gives you the most confirmation of the word. Touching, it's too far. You can't see. The eyes allow you to see things you hear, but they confirm it. I hear a great boom. Is a tree falling? Is something falling from a ladder? You know, I watch it to have confirmation. And so, one of the main aspects when you are mixing, and if you want to mix properly, is to close your eyes when you are tweaking things. And as much as displays on screens are very useful, frequency spectrums, whatever, they can be tools to go faster because you see a resonance, you hear in that range, okay, you go. You need always to check it without watching the screen. And this is true for mixing, but it's also true for an arrangement. If you look at the timeline and you see your line, da, 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 I have a break, na, 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 I wait, okay, and boom, the drop. Yeah, I like that drop. Because you expected it, you saw it coming. Now do the same exercise without watching the screen. And now all of a sudden, you will hear things differently. Even worse, try that with someone sitting next to you. And you will hear, again, another thing, because you will put yourself in the shoes of the person sitting next to you.
Yeah, the shoulder looking effect.
Yeah. Someone is next to you, you listen differently. So we are no machines. This was the first point when I said we hear things with contrast. We are no machines. And our senses trick us all the time. So we want to find ways to avoid this. For example, one thing it's a like systematic process. When I do a move on the plugin, an EQ, a compressor, or whatever, I close my eyes, I hover the mouse on top of the bypass. Close my eyes, I hit a few times so I don't know if it's on or if it's off, and then I listen. Eyes closed. On. What's better? Ah, that's better. Is it on? Fine. Is it off? Okay, I get rid of it. You get rid of that confirmation bias. What you see is not what you hear, or what you hear is not what you see, and people will never see anything about your music. Everyone's always experiencing with their own ears, so you need to put yourself in the same condition when making your choices. You can use tools to guide you, and same goes for EQing. I saw so many times students, when I was teaching at SAE, looking at a spectrometer and say, oh yeah, I see there the resonance, I'm going to dip it. No, you dip something that you see, but is that the problem? Maybe start by singing that resonance. I hear ooh, okay, ooh, that's the note. I sweep my EQ until I get to the ooh, that's the one I need to dip. It's not because my analyzer showed me something. No one is listening to music with analyzers in front of them. And sometimes the resonance can be, again taking a bit side road, but can be what makes the sound. It's what's making surprise or what's making something unique. Sometimes a mistake can be what you are after. It's what's making the sound, right? And that's also a thing to keep in mind, because with all those meters and with all the tips that you can see online by fix this, fix that, use resonance suppressors, tame control, we are in a mindset where everything needs to be perfect, everything needs to be controlled, everything becomes boring.
It's a clinical approach.
And you may want to have something that is very refined, but also house music. I mean, the early deep house, there is grunge, there is noise, you hear the pump of the compressor, it's printing vibe to the music, right? And so there is no right or wrong, but for you music, what do you want to approach? Do you want something that is surgically perfect, but maybe that is lacking vibe? An example of that, and it's a very good example, is vocal treatment. How do you tackle breathing in a voice? In many pop records, they edit all the breathing for the vocal to be totally proper and clean. But then does the performance feel as close to you? And those mistakes, those errors, they are also what makes us able to relate to that performance, right?
Yeah, to know that it's not AI generated.
It is auto-tune, and it's used, and I have nothing against it, but every pitch is always correct. Now they have tools that allow some drift, and so it's becoming more organic. But that little, do I want to or do I want it's alive, right? And so depending on the style you are making, depending on the vibe you want to print in your music, these are all things you need to keep somehow in mind. There is no one goal. There are different moves that with a certain intention brings you to some places. Make sense?